There is a rare moment when time seems to stop. The routine continues outside, noisy and in a hurry, but inside us something whispers and asks for silence. It is in these moments that something deep reveals itself, like an echo that does not belong to this world today. This echo is not the result of simple introspection, but of a message that crossed the invisible to reach us. It is not just any message. It is a call, a warning so intense that it makes us realize how far we are from our true essence. Why do we feel this tightness in our chest when we hear about divine warnings? Because deep down we know that there is something wrong. There is a spiritual tiredness that we pretend not to feel, masked by the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But the truth is that each of us has a silent commitment to something greater, a commitment that we often leave aside for convenience or fear of looking within. When the names of Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini are mentioned, we are not talking about unknown personalities or isolated events. We are talking about voices that have received a greater mission, to transmit a warning directly from heaven. And when heaven speaks, there is no room for banal doubts or for human pride that insists on rationalizing everything. The call is made with a clarity that penetrates even the most hidden corners of our soul. It is like the age that we lose our temper before the infinite. But what does this mean? We hear and read about it. It means we cannot remain undecided when the divine speaks, not just for all humanity, but mainly for those willing to listen. How many times do we prefer not to listen for fear of what we might discover, as if we did not know that silence in the face of the call can cost us much more than we imagine? The warning is not a distant prophecy destined to be fulfilled in a distant future. It is a mirror that reflects today, the now. And when we look at this reflection, we realize that we are distracted by so many small urgencies that take us away from what is really important. Are we ready for the extraordinary, or do we choose to remain stuck in the ordinary while something great is happening before our eyes? The messages received by Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini do not bring easy promises or comfortable predictions. They are an invitation and a warning for us to wake up before time slips through our fingers. If we stop for a moment and truly listen, we will realize that behind each word there is a love as great as the warning is severe. Because only those who truly love are capable of warning with such vehemence. The divine call echoes, but it does not shout. It speaks in the exact measure to be heard by those who have a heart willing to listen. And when we hear, something changes. It is as if a new perception arises within us, taking away the veil that has kept us asleep. The world outside is noisy, but the call does not go to the world. It goes to the invisible. And we who listen either ignore it or finally answer. It carries God's mercy, a reminder that despite all human failures, there is still a chance. We can still transform our history, but for that, we need to act, we need to wake up. It is not enough to simply know that the message exists. It is necessary to open the door of the heart and let it take root, changing not only what we do, but who we are. The question that remains before us is simple and at the same time challenging. Until when will we postpone the encounter with what really matters? When the silence is broken by a divine call, nothing returns to be the same, and neither should we. When the sky decides to break the silence and manifest itself, it is not just any event. It is not a phenomenon that we can interpret casually or with the coldness of skepticism. It is a rare and extraordinary moment where eternity touches the present, and the invisible makes itself visible to remind us of a truth that we often prefer to forget. Life is not limited to what we can see and control. The manifestations of the Virgin Mary do not arise by chance. When she appears, it is not to arouse curiosity or create sensationalism. Her presence is an act of love, but also a serious warning. She manifests herself when the deviations become so serious that the heart of humanity begins to move dangerously away from its divine origin. History shows us that in crucial moments, when man loses his direction, heaven intervenes with clear signs. But are we willing to see them? The Virgin Mary's gaze is the gaze of a mother, and any mother who sees a fatal error cannot remain unmoved. She cannot bear to watch a fall without extending her helping hands. This action is not just to stop the fall, it is also firm, because loving is not just protecting, it is correcting when necessary. Her love is so great that it prefers to see us uncomfortable with the truth rather than let us sink into error. The messages received by Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini carry this divine duality. They are both an embrace and a warning. There are times when the celestial silence weighs upon us, like a reminder that we have free will and the responsibility to use our freedom wisely. But there are also times when this silence breaks, because the peril is growing. It is as if heaven was saying, "You are getting lost, and I can no longer allow you to walk freely." That is why this call does not simply speak, it carries a purpose. It is an invitation to awaken, and it is also a warning that the time of indifference is running out. This is not empty religious speech, nor mystical words disconnected from reality. It is a direct and real call, made with the language of truth and love. How many times in our hurried routine do we ignore what really matters? How many times do we let the essential go unnoticed, worried about passing problems that tomorrow will have no relevance at all? It is exactly this incessant movement of distractions that makes us deaf to the most important warnings. And that is exactly why divine intervention does not come as a spectacle to entertain, but as a sign that interrupts our constant flight. The warning is a reminder that the time we believe we have is not infinite, there is a limit. And when the Virgin Mary speaks, she reminds us that our earthly existence is a prelude to something much greater. We cannot continue living as if we had absolute control of everything, when in fact we depend on something infinitely superior. But there is something powerful in this message. It is not just a warning of justice, it is also proof that we are not abandoned. Heaven does not speak to condemn us, but to save us. If God did not care, there would be no messages, signs, or manifestations. Divine silence would be absolute, but it is not. And the presence of the Virgin among us is proof that despite our flaws, we are still deeply loved. When the sky speaks, everything changes. But for this change to happen within us, we need to make a choice. We can continue living as if this warning was not for us, or we can open our hearts and allow each word to become a guide in the midst of chaos. This is not about fear, but about respect for life and what it represents. The divine voice does not seek to scare us, but to reorient us. It is a gesture of mercy, an invitation to deep reflection and transformation. There are no guarantees of a tomorrow when it comes to spiritual choices. And that is why the warning received by Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini urges us to act now, before time catches up with us with irreversible consequences. So, in the face of this message, we cannot remain neutral. The mother speaks, and the heart must decide. Do we continue to be trapped by distractions? Or do we take a step toward the truth that frees us? When a warning comes from above, it does not carry the lightness of common advice. It is like a trumpet that awakens those who sleep. It calls the attention of those who walk distractedly on the edge of a precipice. The warning received by Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini is not a vague prediction or a mystical omen without purpose. It is a cry coming from the heart of the Heavenly Mother to awaken us from apathy, not with words of despair, but with the strength of someone who loves deeply and does not accept losing those who can still be saved. Why do we feel so much resistance when hearing warning messages? Because they put us in front of something we would rather avoid, the need to change. No one likes to admit that they are following a path that leads to destruction. It is easier to believe that time is on our side and that we will have countless opportunities to correct mistakes. But what the sky tells us is that the time of grace has a limit. And when that limit approaches, God, in His infinite mercy, sends warnings, not to condemn us, but to alert us that the harvest of our choices is approaching. The urgency of this warning is not only in the content of the words received, but in the weight of the spiritual realities it carries. These are not symbolic stories or reflections to fuel religious debates. These are truths that reflect our own situation. Distracted by the vanities of the world, we seek fleeting pleasures, while what is eternal dissolves before our eyes. Every day that we ignore the signs is a day lost in our spiritual journey. The message of the Virgin Mary does not come to scare, but to show us that the difference between destruction and salvation lies in our choices. How many of us have felt trapped in routines? What truly gives us pure and true joy? The call is not of condemnation, but of returning to the essentials, living faith, sincere prayer, reconciliation with God and with ourselves. There is something very human in our stubbornness. We tend to disbelieve in what we cannot touch or prove. Many look at stories like those of Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini with skepticism, seeking rational explanations for something that does not belong to the logic of this world. But the question is not whether we believe in them or not. The question is, are we willing to reflect on our own condition and face the possibility that this warning was also sent to us? The signs are everywhere: wars born from pride and greed, families that disintegrate due to lack of love and patience, people who lose themselves in vices to numb the pain of a spiritual void. Each of these signs points us to a simple, but urgent truth: humanity is moving away from its divine origin. And the further we move away, the more divine mercy tries to reach us. But until when will heaven be able to call us before the consequences of our choices become inevitable? What makes this warning even more significant is the compassion behind it. The Virgin Mary does not manifest herself to highlight our faults, but to offer us a new chance. It is like a mother who sees her child walking towards danger and calls out their name. The call is not a reprimand. It is a desperate plea for them to stop before it is too late. That is exactly what these messages bring us: an urgent invitation to stop, reflect, and start over. Many of us think we have control over our lives. We plan for tomorrow with the illusion that it is guaranteed, but the divine warning reminds us that life is a fragile and valuable gift that can change in an instant. The time of grace is not infinite, but it is sufficient for those who are willing to awaken. This warning is proof that heaven still believes in us, even when we ourselves have lost faith. The urgency of the warning is a reflection of God's love, which gives us every chance to return to the right path before the consequences become reality. However, these chances do not last forever. The human heart, no matter how rebellious it may be, is capable of recognizing the truth when it allows itself to hear it without distractions. This is the invitation now, to listen with the heart and act with the soul. The choice is before us: to ignore or embrace it, to remain indifferent, or accept the chance to start over. The warning was given not as a threat, but as a rescue. What will we do with it? This answer no one can give for us. When words come from heaven, they carry a different weight. They are not just sounds or phrases articulated to comfort or move us. They have a unique power that crosses the defenses of the heart and reaches the exact point where we keep our most intimate truths and our greatest doubts. They are words that lay bare the soul, that confront us with what we cannot hide. They are not there to satisfy curiosities or answer banal questions. They exist to reveal spiritual reality to us with implacable clarity. The warning received by Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini is not covered with promises of easy days or immediate rewards. It is direct and firm, with no room for softened vision, because the truth, when it is revealed, does not accommodate human expectations. It simply imposes itself like a mirror that reflects not what we want to see, but what we need to recognize. The weight of these words comes from the fact that they take us out of our comfort zone and place us in front of decisive choices. These messages do not offer shortcuts or easy answers, but they expose the narrow path we must follow if we want to find something beyond the passing illusions of this world. The warning is clear: the time for remaining apathetic is over. There is no more room for excuses, for the thought of dealing with it later. The words from above call us to commitment, to seriousness, to a different stance towards life. But why is it so difficult to accept them? Because when we hear them, we feel the weight of our responsibility. We feel the call to let go of superficial certainties that we build to protect ourselves. We feel that to follow this voice, we will need to give up everything that feeds our vanity and the ego fights. It tries to convince us that we do not need to change, that the warning is nothing more than something distant, intended for others and not for us. However, there is something impossible to ignore when the sky speaks. Even those who resist feel the vibration of truth. It is not an external noise. It is something that resonates inside, something that challenges and disturbs, as if a long-locked door suddenly opened. This puts us in an uncomfortable position, because after hearing it, we cannot pretend that we don't know. The divine words leave a trail that accompanies us even when we try to forget them. The warning that difficult times are approaching is not an apocalyptic prediction created to scare. It is a declaration of a love so great that it prefers to warn us firmly than to let us walk towards ruin. When we hear the messages of Maria and Myriam Corsini, it is impossible not to feel that there is something urgent and vital being revealed. They are not messages of condemnation, but of mercy. They tell us that divine justice is not revenge, but a restorative balance that manifests itself when humanity surpasses limits that should not be broken. Therefore, the words from above cannot be received with indifference. They invite us to open our eyes and see what has always been there, but that we choose to ignore. How many times do we feel a call within us and decide to postpone it? How many times do we perceive the signs around us and prefer to move forward, as if nothing was happening? The warning does not come to those who are already ready, but to all who still have time to awaken. And yet, this choice is ours. Divine words show us the way, but do not force us to follow it. They illuminate the darkness, but do not push our steps. They offer direction, but the movement needs to come from us. And this brings an immense weight, to know that even with all the mercy offered, the final decision belongs to us. There is something deeply liberating yet challenging in all of this. The warning does not imprison us in fear, but frees us from the illusion that we can continue living as if we were not responsible for the consequences of our choices. When the sky speaks, it does not destroy, but rebuilds. It does not impose, but invites. It does not scare us, but awakens us. The words from above leave us before a spiritual mirror, where we see reflected our faults, but also our capacity to be better. We are not called to be perfect, but to be sincere, humble, and determined in our search for what is fair and true. The sky reminds us that every step, no matter how small, is an act of faith, and every choice, even the most silent, has an eternal impact. In the face of this warning, there is no neutrality. The words pierce us and demand an answer. And perhaps the great question that remains is, what will be our response? Will we resist, or will we finally surrender to the invitation of divine love that never tires of calling us, even when we ourselves are tired of hearing? When the Virgin Mary manifests herself, it is not just a symbolic gesture or an apparition to impress hearts. Her presence is living and real, and carries a greater purpose. It is proof that heaven does not abandon us, even when we move away on our own. There is no condemnation, nor pleasure in seeing children lost along the way. The pain, this mother's pain, is what brings us back, a pain that is not born of despair, but of love. A love so pure and insistent that it manifests itself to rescue, warn, and restore, even when we no longer deserve it. Even though many believe that her messages are harsh, we need to understand what is behind each word. The Celestial Mother does not appear to judge or point out flaws. Her gaze is compassionate, but also firm, because true love does not limit itself to comforting. It also corrects, teaches, and often needs to be direct. She looks at us not with the coldness of a judge, but with the tenderness of someone who knows our weaknesses, and still calls us by name, believing that we can change. How many times in our lives do we resort to maternal figures when we are lost? We seek comfort, and at the same time, we long for that voice that puts us back on the right path. The Virgin Mary is this figure in her highest form. She does not need to appear in distant places to prove her presence. She is among us in prayer, in the moments when we feel an impulse to do good, at times when we avoid error almost without understanding why. This is the reflection of her constant intercession. But when her messages arrive as clearly as those received by Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini, something more urgent is happening. It is as if, for a moment, heaven leaned down to call us with more intensity. Her warning is not only for those who receive it directly, it is for all of us. And although her presence is a promise of help, it reminds us that divine help does not nullify our responsibility. We cannot live waiting to be rescued without moving a step in the right direction. The invitation to awaken comes with the demand for a response, and this response must be a concrete action to review our life, our relationships, our priorities, not because we are obliged to, but because the love we receive deserves a sincere transformation. However welcoming her message may be, it carries a warning that cannot be ignored. Our life cannot be led with the carelessness of those who think they will have all the time in the world. Time is a gift, but it is also a limit. The messages coming from heaven are not repeated through empty insistence. They are like a mother who calls her son before he crosses a dangerous road. She may call him once, twice, 3 times, but there will come a time when, if he does not listen, the consequences will be inevitable. The Virgin Mary does not speak to us of catastrophes to generate fear. She speaks to us of choices and consequences. We live in a world that every day moves further away from the essential. We are tired of the material, of what passes, while our soul, which is eternal, weakens. That is why her presence is not an empty comfort. She is with us to remind us of the immeasurable value of our existence, and how we are capable of changing the trajectory of things when we choose the right path. It is easy to believe that divine warnings do not concern us. We think they are directed to those who are far away, or to those who live a more sinful life than ours. But this is the great illusion. The warning is for everyone, because spiritual distraction does not choose class, creed, or merits. We are all subject to carelessness, pride, and indifference, and it is exactly to take us out of this torpor that the Mother manifests herself. If there is something unshakable in the Virgin Mary, it is her fidelity to her children. She does not abandon us even when we move away. She continues waiting, interceding, and in moments of greater urgency, she makes herself heard in an unquestionable way. But still, she gives us freedom, because true love does not imprison, it liberates. And it is this freedom that makes each choice even more important. Today, her presence is a call to repentance, yes, but also a call to trust. How long have we been extending our hand? She remains firm in her heart, and in a path rebuilt for us. For this reason, when listening to her warnings, we must not harden ourselves nor despair. We must awaken with gratitude, knowing that there is still time. But time is not infinite, and each new call can be the last. The Virgin Mary does not give up on us, but it is up to us not to give up on ourselves. The divine warning is not a harbinger of condemnation, but an urgent call to preparation. When the Virgin Mary manifests herself so clearly, it is because the times demand more than superficial devotions or automatic attitudes of faith. Her message is not to be contemplated from a distance, but lived and practiced with intensity. Spiritual preparation is a profound movement that begins within us and is reflected in every detail of our lives. It is not about grand gestures or external changes that impress, but a sincere return to the essential. The first thing we need to understand is that this preparation is not about fleeing the world or hiding from trials. It is not about seeking refuge in physical places, but about creating a sacred space within the heart, a space where faith is not shaken by circumstances, where trust remains firm even in the face of the greatest storms. This is the invitation of the Virgin Mary, not only to survive what is to come, but to go through everything with an awake, vigilant, and peaceful spirit. It is difficult to begin this preparation because it requires a break with habits that we have cultivated for years. It requires that we put aside the justifications we use to postpone change. It involves facing what we often avoid: our own mistakes, our lack of commitment to what we know is right. The warning received by Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini was not an alert for an exclusive group of special people. It was a call for all humanity, a collective call, but one that needs to be answered individually. How can we prepare ourselves spiritually? There are no hidden secrets or magic formulas. The preparation goes through 3 pillars that never cease to be current: prayer, vigilance, and reconciliation. But these pillars only come to life when they are not repeated mechanically. Praying is not just reciting memorized words. It is opening your heart in sincerity, talking to God with humility, knowing that He listens to every plea, even those not said out loud. Being vigilant is not living in fear, but being attentive to temptations that try to lead us astray. It is realizing when pride, vanity, and lack of forgiveness begin to grow within us. And reconciliation is not just asking for forgiveness, but transforming our actions in response to the forgiveness we receive. The warning is clear: difficult times are ahead. But we do not need to face them with despair. Spiritual preparation is a shield that does not exempt us from challenges, but strengthens us to go through them without losing our soul in the process. This preparation is not for tomorrow, nor for when things start to fall apart. It is for today. Because although we do not know exactly when the prophesied events will be fulfilled, we know that the state of our heart depends on the choices we make now. The world offers us countless distractions to keep us away from this preparation. We have information from all sides, endless entertainment, stimuli that compete for our attention every second. It is easy to be swallowed up by it all, anesthetized by the false sensation that everything is under control. But the Virgin's warning takes us out of this torpor, reminding us that appearances can be deceiving, and that behind the facade of normality, there is a spiritual battle being fought. Preparation is not a luxury, but a necessity. There is a difference between fearing the future and being prepared for it. Fear paralyzes, but preparation liberates. Because he who is at peace with his conscience, who lives in tune with what is just and true, does not fear the unknown. He knows that whatever happens, his life is in the hands of God. The warning does not want to rob us of hope, but to teach us to build it on solid foundations, and not on fragile and fleeting expectations. It is important to remember that this spiritual preparation is not about perfection. We are not called to be impeccable, but authentic. The Virgin Mary does not expect us to become saints overnight, but rather to take real steps in the right direction, steps that require sacrifices, yes, but that also bring peace and joy because they reconnect us to the original purpose of our existence. That is why we cannot postpone it. We cannot fool ourselves with the idea that we still have a lot of time. The warning is not an invitation to live in fear, but a call to act with responsibility and faith. And the greatest preparation we can make is not in seeking external answers, but in strengthening our connection with God, in cultivating virtues that sustain us in times of trial, and in being living witnesses of the love that He offers us. Today's warning is proof of mercy, an opportunity for change. The big question is what we will do with it. Will we wait for circumstances to force us to wake up, or will we take the step now with awareness and freedom? The choice is ours, and each decision counts. Each prayer, each reconciliation, each gesture of faith is a seed of preparation that can blossom at the moment we need it most. When we hear a warning coming from heaven, we can be tempted to think that it is just a message of judgment, of severe correction. But in truth, it is much more than that. It is a testimony of the perfect balance between love and justice. The warning is not born from the desire to punish, but from the desire to save. It does not come to destroy, but to rebuild what selfishness, indifference, and sin have broken. The Virgin Mary, in her messages to Luz de Maria and Myriam Corsini, shows us that divine justice is not vengeful, but restorative, and yet it is firm, because true love cannot be permissive with that which destroys us. The impact of these messages is profound because behind every warning lies a greater purpose: to awaken us to the truth and rescue us from ourselves. God does not abandon us to the chaos of our own choices without first showing us a different path, but He also does not force us to follow it. Divine justice is fair because it respects everyone's freedom. And that's where the weight of our decisions comes in. Everything we do, no matter how simple it may seem, has spiritual consequences. Every gesture of kindness or selfishness, every forgiveness granted or denied, every prayer or silence before the divine call, everything counts on the scales of life. That's why the warning comes with love, but also with seriousness, because justice is God's response to the imbalance that we ourselves have created. This justice is not a cold and distant sentence, but an act of correction. The objective is not to destroy, but to restore. However, restoration is not always a smooth process. When a tree grows crooked, it takes force to bend it back. So too is divine justice. It does not hurt us without reason, but corrects us so that we can return to our axis. Behind this call to awakening, there is also a promise. The Virgin Mary assures us that even in times of tribulation, heavenly help will be abundant for those who remain firm. This is not an arrogant firmness based on one's own strength. It is a firmness born from the humility of surrender, of faith, of those who recognize that they can do nothing without God. Many wonder why heaven allows so much pain, but the question we should ask is how much of all this is a consequence of our own choices and the free will that we exercise selfishly. The divine messages tell us that there will be justice, but they also tell us that we do not need to fear it if we are in communion with good. The warning is a chance to reposition ourselves, to look at our lives and reflect on what fruits we are cultivating. Are our actions watered with love, truth, and humility, or are we feeding resentment, judgments, and empty ambitions? We cannot forget that the time of grace exists to give us this opportunity to change before the natural consequences of our mistakes reach us irreversibly. The great human dilemma is precisely wanting God's love without accepting His justice. We want blessings, but often we refuse the responsibility of living according to the truth we profess. The warning takes us away from this illusory comfort. It tells us that we cannot seek mercy without recognizing the need for correction. And most importantly, God does not offer apologies like men do. He offers us infinite chances, both in moments of trial and moments of hope, because divine justice is not the end. It is a means of purification, the way God balances things so that we can recover what we lost with our choices. However, this purification needs to be accepted with faith and not with revolt. Many, upon hearing the warnings, ask why God allows this. But perhaps the real question is, why did we get here without listening to the countless warnings He gave us? The trail of love and justice that these messages leave is a reminder that we are not alone. Even in the most difficult moments, the help of the Virgin Mary is real, but not like a magical promise of immediate deliverance. It offers us strength to resist, grace to persevere, and courage to rise as many times as necessary. It reminds us that we are beloved children, but also responsible, and it is this responsibility that makes us free. If we listen sincerely, we will see that the warning is not a weight, but a blessing. It does not take away our peace. It gives us back our sense of purpose. It does not condemn us. It awakens us to choose a higher path. The call is for justice, yes, but a justice accompanied by a love that does not give up on us. It is proof that God does not abandon us even when we move away. He seeks us, calls us, and offers us a new chance. The warning challenges us to reflect. Are we ready to welcome both love and justice? Are we willing to change before it is too late? Heaven will not force us, but invites us. The decision is ours, and it needs to be made not tomorrow, but now, because every moment in which we remain deaf to the call is one more step towards the abyss. And each moment in which we choose to listen is a new opportunity to be restored and led to true peace.